what is the title of the book? What is it about? And as much as you want to give in a couple sentences, what do you think this is?
Well, it's definitely a process that continues to develop, and in the development, teach me so much. The book's title is Building the Road as We Walk.
Mhm.
And the subtitle, I think, is important because it gives an indication of the really multifaceted nature of the work, which helps us to make inroads into the content for a lot of different types of learners. In
Mm.
my life, I have a lot of people who are not really interested in sitting down and reading a lengthy novel, whether they can practically apply what's in that novel to their lives or just be entertained by it. And so I think writing in a new kind of way that really allows people to see themselves in the shoes of others is a big part of this work. But the subtitle of Building the Road as We Walk is Our Creative Future in Features, Gleanings, and Colloquialisms.
We met a long time ago in high school, and you were one of the first people that saw my creative talent. You were like, you need to go into a stage, basically. And that's what I think this is what's great about this book is that you've always had this penchant for finding creativity, and I think that you found a great series of creative people as well. And that's what I knew you had that penchant. I knew you were going to find other great creative people, so I already knew that where we're going to get involved in here and what this is going to be something full of a lot of great voices.
I'm really thinking of the book as a creative's field guide.
Mm,
I have some great memories of just sort of being out in the cycles of nature and just really
mm,
observing the way that things would change around us in all the different seasons and
mm,
having a field guide to sort of identify like what is that? How can I make use of it? Should I avoid it? I'm
mm.
really starting to think of this book project as that grafted onto our creativity.
A farmer's almanac for creativity in a way, or like a barometer of sorts for the climate and how to get through it and be creative.
I had a book
Mm.
published in 2023 through a small press based in LA that is a book of dialogues that's
Oh wow.
meant to help us
Hmm.
discern between our ego and our intuition, which I think a lot
Mm.
of people can feel really confused. And self-esteem, I think, is so different from ego, but that's like a very fine line.
What I love is that you come from a place of actually wanting to help and support your community with that. It's not about giving self help or the opportunity self help to make something back from it, more as you're trying to communicate to the community that there are tools and things you can use to employ art into your life and make better yourself through art, or not just art in general, but through just thoughtfulness, reflection, how to reflect, other people's reflections. It's very thoughtful, and that's not stuff you normally see in a book that's mainly like, usually they're structured in a way that's just not the same. It has a very keep reading my books to find the true secret. And I feel like this is a book where the true secret is on every single page.
You're so perceptive, Corey, but like that comes to mind when you think of this project because I think another thing that's kind of signature to my writing and all my
Mm,
creative practices, because I have a couple,
mm.
um, is
You make
collage.
beautiful, yeah, collage. Real quick, your collages are very interesting and neat. I love. I've heard so many people take up collage, and I think that your collage work also reflects a good deal of how you're thinking.
No matter what I'm writing, I really try to evoke a feeling of liveness and a feeling of improvisation, which like I think often about how I've never been a great improviser, but I think I'm really able to listen and respond, which is a key tenet of improvising, right? And
It's
Corey,
the
I
yes and.
think,
It's the old
well,
yes and.
I mean, even when we were on improv team in high school, and you are just so spontaneous, and you fill up your life with the research of other people's existence. And so I always felt like you can hold so many different stories inside of you. And I felt that that is the best way to be an artist. And so this project was really a way to move out of like a single authorship mentality that I think the American theater really prizes, like
Mm,
publishing novels. It's really about like that singular author's voice, right? And while
hmm.
I think I have a pretty developed voice as just sort of a human and a writer,
I think
um,
you do.
thank you. One of the chapters in this book that I had the great pleasure of writing on commission for a Berlin-based magazine called Present Magazine. The way that Present Magazine chooses their content is sort of all around how artists like just get started on things. And I think that that
Mm,
is so critical in thinking about this field guide. Like, we need some text that helps us to distinguish what we need to create and how to start
mhm.
creating it, but also how we can be reinforced in our creative practice by the community around us.
Do you think it's hard for anyone to take their own advice, or do you think it's something that as you're writing this, you're learning to take that advice, or something that you've completed and that you're skilled at yet, or you're still working on it, or you're writing this to help you better give or take? Like, what do you see that area? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think all of this content helps me to better understand how I can investigate reality
Mm,
through an identity that I get to wake up every day and choose, which is that of being a creative person, being an artist. I think something that this
mm,
book really grapples with is like definitions. And I think early in the text I have right now, the 130 artists who responded to this original survey that fueled the book,
yeah.
they said really clearly that the terminology of artist, non-artist, that
Mm,
needed to be put aside because we don't need any more language to divide or separate or create categories of human beings. We need to
mm,
really understand how to manage the systems and cycles that allow us to dig into our own natural talents and faculties, and then
mm,
put out the best of those talents and faculties to then reflect on how they can be further improved. And this whole
mm,
book writing process has just been about me reflecting on if I am living in alignment with the mandates of the creative community that I'm part of. Of these 130 people who
mm,
responded, you responded. And I think it was such a testament of trust, whether it was people like you who have known me for a really long time and were able to give really vulnerable responses, or people who I had literally never met
mm.
who through a friend of a friend, through a residency, really took a chance and were equally as vulnerable in sharing about these things that really matter to them.
I think that empathy is part of all your work. So it's always interesting to learn where you think your empathy came from, where you think that, you know, where that started, that origin.
Yeah, totally. I think my parents are both teachers in really different ways.
Mm.
And I think
They're literal, by the way, they're literal teachers too.
literal, yeah, literal and figurative for sure.
Yes, yes.
Um, and I think that teaching outside of like classrooms and learning outside of classrooms was always a really big part of my life.
Mm,
Um, I think about the way my parents raised my brother and I. My parents got divorced when I was 7. And while the
mm,
households that they sort of led were really, really different,
mm,
in both environments, we were always encouraged to kind of like be out in the world and thinking really
mm,
critically about our place and what we could give. So teaching and learning as like a service, that's very much
mm,
a part of the religious practice that my parents both came
mm.
through and that I'm still part of, which is the Baha'i faith as well. So a moral and spiritual foundation that's based upon how you can give to community through always teaching and learning.
And it's more about spreading positivity in general, not just the words of God, but the positive things in general that need to be said. It's not always just about saying a Bible quote. It's more about um, applying it to reality. Is this something you can actually do? And what things we need to realize are more metaphorical than, you know. So I've always been enamored by that. I always thought that was a very cool.
Another thing
Mhm,
about the whole beginning process was, my kind of inquiry into community life. It
mhm,
was a little bit of like a small scale way to address kind of a wider problem I had seen.
Mm,
in the years leading up to this project, which this is the third year I've been working on this project, coming out of leaving an interim directorship at a nonprofit that is still really near to my heart called the Creative Center. And what the Creative Center does is provide free arts programs to anyone in New York living with cancer or a chronic illness, as well as their caregivers. And all of those programs had always happened in person, in
mhm,
community spaces, and in hospital sites here in New York. And during COVID, like overnight, mostly to not lose the grant funding that supported all of the programs and supported this cohort of 75 artists who were the backbone of the whole organization, we had to pivot into online programming and then figure out how to safely adapt into hybrid models. So I had spent all of this time working with artists to meet the needs of our community in New York, which was so hard hit by COVID. I mean,
yeah,
like, I still see these images of like these external morgues outside of hospitals, these hospital workers who are so not supported. They come out of COVID and they don't get any additional funding. They don't get any
yeah,
additional respite. And I
mm,
think as a general populace across the world, I think the biggest impact of COVID was this isolation left us really unable to grapple with how to be with people in real life.
mm,
And so thinking about writing a book, you're alone when you write, and then people are often just reading it alone. The whole way that this project started with the survey was, would it be possible to create dialogues of people who have shared interests but maybe have different opinions so that
mm,
people could meet other people where they're at without having to sort of encounter them directly in this kind of like frenetic, nervous way that I often feel at parties? Like, I love to talk to people, right? But I just kind of don't know when you walk up to someone like how they're going to respond to the things that really matter. And I think now is the
mhm,
time for us to have conversations that really matter about creativity and about the way that intersects with every part of our lives. So,
mhm,
coming out of COVID, it felt really important to me to try to create dialogues between a lot of different kinds of people that made them feel less alone and less isolated. And so the format and the content of this book project really address that directly.